Nobody told Diana that Ward 7 was different. Not really. Not in the way it needed to be said. Her supervisor had mentioned it the way you mention a weather forecast. Something factual, something manageable. Pediatric palliative. You'll do rounds. Chart vitals. Keep the families calm. Diana had nodded and written it down in her new hire notebook with a little sunflower on the cover, because she was 26 and thought preparedness was the same thing as readiness. It isn't. She found that out on a Tuesday in February, when the hallway outside Ward 7 smelled like disinfectant and someone's leftover soup and something underneath both of those things that she had no name for yet. Something that lived in places where people had been saying goodbye for a long time. She stood at the entrance for longer than she should have. Her stethoscope was cold against her neck. Her sneakers, the white ones she'd bought specifically for this job, still box clean, squeaked twice on the linoleum and then went quiet, as if even they understood. Go in, she told herself. She went in. The ward had 8 rooms. 6 were occupied that week. Diana did her rounds the way she'd been trained, efficiently, gently, with the clipboard held like a small shield she didn't know she was holding. She checked vitals. She smiled at parents who had the particular hollowed-out look of people who hadn't slept in weeks and had stopped expecting to. She made notes. She kept her voice at the pitch they'd taught her in school, warm, level, professional. She was doing fine. She was absolutely doing fine until she reached room 7. The door was half open. She knocked anyway, the way you do, and pushed it gently, and then she just stood there for a second, because the room had crayon drawings taped all over the walls. Dozens of them. Suns with too many spokes. Houses with smoke coming from chimneys. Dogs that looked more like loaves of bread. One drawing, right above the bed, showed 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, and beneath it, in the wobbly handwriting of someone still learning letters, me and Mama forever. Forever. Spelled wrong. Hung with tape that was already starting to peel at one corner. Diana looked at it for probably 3 seconds. Felt something shift in her chest like furniture being moved in a room above her. Then, she looked at the bed. His name was Eli. She knew this from the chart before she knew it from him. Eli Marcus, 6 years old, admitted 11 weeks ago. Diagnosis a word so long, and clinical it seemed almost indecent applied to something so small. He weighed 38 pounds. His hair had grown back in soft, uneven patches, the color of brown sugar in the places where light hit it. He was awake when she came in. Not sitting up. He didn't have the energy for that anymore, his chart had said, and the chart was right. But his eyes were open, and they tracked her from the doorway to the side of his bed with the particular attentiveness of a child who has spent a lot of time watching adults come and go and has gotten very good at reading what they bring with them. Diana made herself breathe normally. Hey there, she said. I'm Diana. I'm your nurse today. He considered this. His eyes were very dark, very still. Then, you have a flower on your notebook. She looked down. The sunflower. She'd forgotten. I do, she said. Do you like flowers? A pause. Small. Waited. My mom does. His mother, Sarah Marcus, 31, the name was in the chart, was in the family room down the hall. Diana had seen her when she came in, a woman with the kind of posture that used to be straight and had been slowly pressed down, sitting with both hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup that had gone cold an hour ago. She was staring at nothing in a way that meant she was staring at everything. One of the senior nurses had told Diana, quietly, in the break room that morning, Sarah barely leaves except to shower. Eats maybe once a day. Won't talk to the counselors. She'd paused then, stirring her coffee. The dad isn't in the picture. It's just the 2 of them. Diana had nodded and added it to her mental file the way you add things you think you can keep separate. You can't keep them separate. Nobody can. She took Eli's vitals. He let her without complaint, which was its own kind of heartbreak. 6-year-olds are supposed to squirm, supposed to ask will it hurt, supposed to be distracted by cartoons or bribed with stickers. Eli held out his small arm with a patience that belonged to someone 4 times his age. He watched the blood pressure cuff inflate and deflate with distant curiosity, like it was happening to a body he was only visiting. Does that feel tight? She asked. A little. Beat. But that's okay. But that's okay. She wrote down his numbers. Kept her face arranged. Do you want me to turn on the TV? She asked. I can find cartoons. He thought about it with the gravity of someone making an important decision. Can you stay instead? He asked. Just for a little? Mama's tired, and I don't want to wake her up. Diana looked at her clipboard. She had 4 more rooms. She had a medication cart to sort. She had a supervisor who had said, nicely but clearly, that the first week was about learning efficiency. Sure, she said. I can stay for a little. She pulled the chair to the side of his bed, the one that had clearly been slept in, reshaped by someone else's vigil, and sat down. He talked. Not constantly, not exhaustingly. In the way of children who have learned to ration, a little at a time, resting between, aware on some animal level that words cost something now. He told her about a dog he wanted. A golden one, he specified, not a brown one. Golden, like the sun did his hair. He told her the dog's name would be Biscuit, even though he hadn't met the dog yet. He told her, with great seriousness, that Biscuit would sleep at the foot of his bed because dogs like the foot. That was just a fact. Diana said she'd heard that too. He told her that his favorite color used to be blue but was now orange because blue was too sad. He told her this casually, the way you'd mention a preference for one cereal over another, and Diana filed it in the place inside her that was rapidly running out of filing room. He told her that his mom made the best grilled cheese in the world, the actual world, and that she always cut it into triangles, not squares, because triangles tasted better. He said this with total conviction. Diana told him she agreed. Triangles absolutely tasted better. For a moment, brief, ordinary, ridiculous, they were just two people having a conversation about sandwiches. Then he got quiet. Not the drifting quiet of someone tired. The deliberate quiet of someone thinking about whether to say a thing. Diana waited. Diana? Yeah. He was looking at the ceiling. At the drawing of him and his mother, me and Mama forever, the tape peeling at the corner. Is my mama going to be okay? The question landed somewhere in Diana's sternum and didn't leave. She thought about her training. She thought about the clinical language, the careful deflections, the guidelines for talking to pediatric patients about emotionally complex topics. She thought about all of it, and she looked at this 38-pound boy who had asked her the one question he wasn't supposed to be thinking about, the question that meant he'd been carrying it alone for God knows how long. Why are you asking about your mama? She said softly. Instead of yourself? He turned his head and looked at her, and in those very dark, very still eyes was something that made Diana understand, fully, for the first time, in her body and not just her brain, exactly where she was and what this job was going to ask of her. Because, he said, I'm going to be okay no matter what. But she's going to miss me. Into part 1. Diana did not cry in the room. She wanted to, felt the pressure of it sitting high in her throat like something swallowed wrong. But she didn't, because Eli was watching her, and Eli needed her face to stay steady. And so she steadied it. She tucked the feeling somewhere behind her back teeth, and she breathed through her nose, and she stayed. You're a pretty smart kid, she said. Her voice came out even. Almost. He shrugged one shoulder. Mama thinks I don't know stuff. But I'm 6, not a baby. I know you're not a baby. She cries in the bathroom. He said it factually, without accusation. Just reporting. At night when she thinks I'm asleep. But the walls are thin. Thin walls. 38 pounds. Crayon drawings taped up by a mother who kept running out of tape, and kept buying more. Diana looked at her hands in her lap for a moment. Does it scare you? She asked. Hearing her, he thought about this with the same gravitational seriousness he'd given the question about Biscuit's sleeping arrangements. Then, it makes me feel bad. Because I can't fix it. Because I can't fix it. 6 years old. 38 pounds. Worrying about the things he cannot fix. Eli, she said. That's not your job. Then whose job is it? She didn't have an answer to that. Nobody does, really. The universe doesn't distribute those jobs equitably or with any consideration for who's equipped to hold them. They just land. On mothers in bathroom floors. On fathers who aren't there. On boys who weigh 38 pounds and lie in bed surrounded by their own crayon drawings and worry about the wrong direction, not themselves, outward, at the people they are leaving. Diana didn't say any of this. What she said was, want to know a secret? He looked at her, intrigued in spite of himself. What kind? The good kind. The kind that's actually true. A beat. His eyes, those still, watchful, ancient child's face eyes. Okay, he said. She leaned forward slightly. Not performatively. Just closing the distance. Your mom cries because you were the best thing that ever happened to her. That's not sad. That's just what happens when someone loves you so much that the idea of a world without you in it, even for a second, makes them feel like they can't breathe. She paused. Let it settle. The crying isn't her breaking. It's just the love coming out sideways, because it's too big to stay in. Eli was very still. Too big to stay in, he repeated quietly, like he was memorizing it. Too big to stay in, she confirmed. He looked back at the ceiling, at the drawing. Me and Mama forever. Diana, still here. Can you fix the tape? the corners coming down. She fixed the tape. She had to stand on the little step stool they kept for reaching the monitors, and she pressed the corner back against the wall and smoothed it down, and it held. It wasn't a permanent fix. Tape never is, but it held for now, and for now was all she had to offer, and she gave it. When she stepped back down and turned around, Eli was watching her with something on his face she could only describe as satisfied, like a small landlord who'd put in a maintenance request and been taken seriously. "Thank you," he said. "Of course." She settled back into the chair. She should go. She knew she should go. Her clipboard was calling from the side table, and the medication cart wasn't going to sort itself, and there were 4 other rooms for other small people with their own weights to carry. She stayed. They played a game. Eli's idea, an inventory of hypothetical animals, each one assigned a job it would be terrible at. A giraffe as a dentist, a crab as a pianist, a very small hamster as a school bus driver. Eli's face did something during this game. Opened up, came forward, became briefly and wildly the face of a child who was only 6 and had no use for wisdom or patience or the particular kind of bravery adults kept projecting onto him. He giggled at the hamster bus driver. The sound of it. Diana would carry the sound of it for the rest of her life, and she knew it in the moment it happened, like you sometimes know things. "Your turn," he said. "Give it a job." "The hamster?" "No. Pick a new animal." "Okay." She thought. "A flamingo." "Flamingo as." He screwed up his face, concentrating. "A referee." "Why is that funny?" "Because." As if this were obvious. Flamingos only stand on one leg. They'd keep falling over every time they blew the whistle. She laughed. Actually laughed. The room, with its thin walls and its peeling tape and its too big love, held the sound of 2 people laughing about a flamingo referee, and for 20 minutes, that was exactly what it was. Sarah Marcus appeared in the doorway at minute 18. Diana saw her first, caught the movement in her peripheral, and looked up, and there she was, Eli's mother. Still in the same clothes she'd had on in the family room, the paper cup nowhere now, hands hanging at her sides. She was watching her son laugh, and she was not crying. Past crying, maybe, or before it. Her face was in that particular register beyond simple emotion, the one that only love pushed all the way to its limit can produce. Eli turned his head and saw her. "Mama," he said. "Diana says flamingos would be bad referees." Sarah blinked. Looked at Diana. Something moved across her face. "She's right," Sarah said. Her voice came out rough and used. "I was just keeping him company," Diana said, rising from the chair. "He wanted, I know." Sarah's eyes stayed on her son. "Thank you." It was 2 words. They contained a paragraph Diana didn't need written out for her. She gathered her clipboard, gave Eli's foot, visible under the blanket, small as a secret, a gentle pat the way you tap a table before leaving. "I'll come back and check on you in a couple hours." "Okay." He paused. "Diana?" She stopped at the door. His voice was lower now. The game face put away. The 6-year-old who'd been briefly, luminously just a 6-year-old receding back into the boy who worried about his mother through thin walls. "If something happens to me," he said, "will you tell her what I said? About the love being too big to stay in?" Diana's hand found the door frame. Held it. "Yeah," she said. "I will." He nodded. Like that was settled. Like he'd just arranged something important and could rest easier now. "Good," he said. "Because I think she needs to hear it from someone other than me." Diana walked back into the hallway. Made it 7 steps. 8. The supply closet was on the left. She went in, closed the door, and stood in the dark between shelves of folded linens and boxes of medical tape. Medical tape, so much of it, enough to hold every drawing on every wall in this ward 10 times over, and pressed her hand over her mouth and let herself feel every single thing she'd been holding behind her back teeth since the moment a 6-year-old boy had told her he was going to be okay no matter what. 90 seconds. She gave herself 90 seconds. Then, she straightened her scrubs, touched the stethoscope, opened the door, and went back to work. Into part 2. Eli Marcus died on a Saturday. Not in the way that phrase usually lives, abrupt, loud, braced for. He went quietly, the way he'd done most things, in the gray hour before dawn when the ward was at its stillest, and the overhead lights had dimmed to the nighttime setting, and the hallway smelled faintly of the lavender Sarah had started spraying on his pillow because she'd read somewhere that familiar scents were comforting. She was holding his hand when it happened. Diana was there too. She'd come in early, hadn't been scheduled, had simply woken at 4:30 and known The way you know things in your body before your brain catches up. And she dressed and driven in and walked to room 7 and knocked quietly. And Sarah had looked at her from the chair and not said a word. And Diana had come in and stood on the other side of the bed. And the three of them, woman, boy, woman, had been in that room together for the last 40 minutes of Eli's life. He was mostly asleep, had been for the past 2 days, drifting in and out of a consciousness that came and went like a signal failing. But earlier that night, at 2 in the morning, when Sarah had been dozing in the chair and the ward was as quiet as it ever got, he had woken. And he had whispered something. Diana had leaned in, close enough that she could smell the lavender on his pillow and see, in the dim light, the soft, uneven patches of hair that had grown back like something trying. She heard it. She thought about that whisper for a long time afterward. Not the whole of the grief of it. That came later, slower, in the weeks that followed when she would sometimes be doing something completely ordinary, washing dishes or stopped at a red light or standing in a grocery store aisle, and the sound of a child's giggle would pass through the air somewhere nearby, and she would have to stand very still for a moment and breathe. She thought about the whisper specifically, what it meant, what it had asked of her, what it cost a 6-year-old boy, whose body was already doing the enormous labor of letting go, to spend some of his last conscious energy on those few words. What kind of love produces that? What kind of love gives outward even then? After, Diana sat in the family room with Sarah. They'd been there for an hour, maybe longer. Diana's shift had technically started. Nobody came to tell her that. The ward had closed around them the way it did, absorbing grief the way it had absorbed 1,000 griefs before, walls that had heard too much and said nothing. Sarah wasn't crying anymore. She'd cried when it happened. Not loudly. Nothing dramatic. Just a sound that came from somewhere below language, and below crying too. A sound that belonged to the moment a mother's hands feel a child's hands go still. Then, she'd sat quietly for a long time, and Diana had sat with her, and neither of them had spoken. Now Sarah was looking at her coffee cup. Cold again. Always cold. You were here early, Sarah said. Not a question. Not an accusation. Just noticing. I wanted to be, Diana said. A beat. The fluorescent light above them buzzed faintly. Down the hall, somewhere, a door opened and closed. Did he? Sarah stopped. Started again. Was he scared? At the end, Diana thought about 2 a.m. About the lavender. About leaning in. No, she said. And this was true. She'd looked into his face in that last hour, and what she'd seen was something that was not peace exactly. Peace was too mild a word, too pastoral, but something more like completion. A small person who had done everything he came to do and knew it. Sarah nodded. Her hands tightened around the cup. He loved you, Diana said. A lot. I know. A pause. Thin. Breakable. I hope he knew that. She stopped. The sentence was too big to finish. And this was the moment. The one Eli had asked her to be ready for, from his hospital bed with his crayon drawings and his still dark eyes and the careful, precise economy of a child who understood that some things needed to be arranged before you go. He did know, Diana said. But he actually said something to me 2 nights ago, and he asked me to tell you. Sarah looked up, her face, bare, gutted, stripped of everything but the willingness to hear, turned toward Diana the way a person turns toward a window when they have been in the dark a very long time. He woke up early in the morning, Diana said. And I was there. And, he whispered, she paused. Let herself feel it again. The lavender. The dim light. The small voice in the quietest hour. He whispered, tell Mama the crying isn't bad. It's just the love coming out because it's too big to stay in. And I know it. I knew it the whole time. Silence. The fluorescent light buzzed. Sarah Marcus pressed her hand over her mouth. Not to stop a sound. Diana understood that. To hold it in, not the grief, not the loss, but something else. Something she needed to keep for a minute before it became real. The love too big to stay in. Her child. 6 years old. 38 pounds. In his last hours, awake in the dark, arranging the one gift he still had left to give. Sarah wept. This time it was different from before. Not the sound below language. Not the helpless, unwilled thing that happens when a hand goes still. This was something that was almost, against all odds, the wrong word and also the only word. Relief. Like someone had been holding something very heavy for a very long time and had just, finally, been told, I see you holding that. It was worth holding. Diana didn't move, didn't speak, didn't reach for the professional distance that would have been easier and would have cost Sarah something. She stayed. They sat together until the coffee machine in the corner beeped its ridiculous hourly beep, and Sarah laughed. Actually laughed, brief and wet and startled by itself, and said, "That machine has been annoying me for 11 weeks. It's the worst," Diana agreed. Sarah looked at her, red-eyed, wrecked. Somewhere underneath the wreckage, something lit. "He liked you," she said. "I could tell. He didn't warm up to people easily. Took him a while with me. Actually, when he was born, he just looked at me for a long time and decided." Diana smiled, felt it in her face for real. "He looked at me for a long time too," she said. "I think I passed the test." "He had standards," Sarah said. And the pride in her voice, pure, unguarded, present tense pride, the kind that doesn't accommodate the past tense no matter what, the kind that will still say he has when everyone else says he had, was the most alive thing Diana had heard in weeks. She walked out of that hospital at 11:30 in the morning. The February sun was doing its cold February thing, present but unhelpful, light without warmth, the way February likes to operate. Diana stood in the parking lot and felt it on her face and thought about flamingos falling over when they blew the whistle, and about tape that peels at the corner, and about the way Eli had said, "But that's okay," when the blood pressure cuff felt tight, and about 38 pounds, and golden dogs named Biscuit, and a boy who spent his last awake hours worrying about his mother. What the 6-year-old whispered left her in tears. Not then, not in the parking lot, not in the supply closet version that belonged to that moment. Later, at home, in her car, sitting in her driveway, unable to make herself go in yet, when the full weight of what she'd been handed finally made itself known. Not because it was sad. It was sad, yes, but that wasn't the whole thing, and crying only because it was sad would have been a disservice to Eli, who had not been operating from sadness, had not organized his last hours around pity or grief or the tragic weight of what was happening to him. He had operated from love. Specifically, the kind of love that looks outward when it has every right to look inward. The kind that asks, "Will my mama be okay?" when it should, by all rights, only be thinking of itself. The kind that understands, at 6 years old and 38 pounds, and with the walls doing what thin walls do, that the people we leave behind need someone to tell them, "I knew. The whole time, I knew how much you loved me." That the love was never lost. Only too big to stay in. Diana went back to Ward 7 the following Tuesday. Different patients now. One of the crayon drawing rooms had been quietly cleared while she was off. The suns with too many spokes, the bread loaf dogs, the rainbow, and the 2 stick figures, and, forever, all of it taken down, and folded by careful hands, and put in a bag that Sarah had taken with her when she left. The walls were bare. Diana stood in the doorway of the empty room for a moment, looked at the exact spot above the bed where the drawing had been, where she'd stood on the step stool, and pressed the peeling corner back down, and it had held. She made a note in her own private record, not the clipboard, not the charts, not the official language of numbers and dosages and times. In the record she kept for herself, the one that held everything Ward 7 was teaching her about what human beings were made of when everything else was stripped away. Eli Marcus, 6 years old, weighed 38 pounds, was not afraid, loved his mother more than he feared anything, had standards, passed the golden dog's name on to Biscuit, who doesn't know yet what he's inheriting. She pressed her hand flat against the doorframe, held it there for a moment. Then, she turned and walked back down the hallway, her white sneakers no longer box clean, her sunflower notebook a little more worn, her understanding of what this job would ask of her now intimate and permanent, and no longer something she could put in a mental file and keep separate. You can't keep them separate. Nobody can. The ward had told her that. Eli had made sure she understood.